Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited today to be reviewing a book from one of my favorite authors, My Friend by Fredrik Backman. Fredrik Backman has been one of my favorite authors for a handful of years now, and I think he might actually now be my top favorite author, which is really saying something because that was previously Charles Dickens. So I'm sorry to Dickens, he has been outranked. I was over the moon excited when I found out that not only was Fredrik Backman coming on a North American book tour, but he was coming to a place within a couple hours drive of me. And so I got tickets to go see him speak live and in person. And that was such a cool experience. So in this video, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about that experience and hearing him speak. And then I'm going to get into more of the book review. So I'm going to give a quick synopsis of the book, some of my own personal thoughts, some content and trigger warnings, and then some spoilers at the end. And everything will be timestamped, so if you want to jump around or skip spoilers or whatnot, you can check below to make sure you don't get any spoilers if you don't want them. It's been several months since I heard him speak, and I still feel like that I am still taking in so many things that he said. He speaks the same way that he writes, which is just so cool. I really appreciated a lot of what he shared about his writing process and about some of the ways that he approaches writing and how he writes his books. As a writer myself, you know, it's really hard. Writing is really hard. And just hearing someone who is clearly very well established as an author, and he's got some very well-known books, hearing someone say that writing is hard, it was just so encouraging. And the way that he worded it, I think he has to be an Enneagram 4. Maybe he's not, I don't know. But so much of what he said, it just spoke exactly to where I was at and kind of what I was thinking and feeling. And it was just so encouraging. One thing I will say that he said about his writing process, he said something along the lines, I'm not going to get an exact quote, but how people always expect him to write and then there's a book. And he's like, you don't understand. That's not my process. My process is chaos, 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 book. And he brought that up a couple times throughout the evening. And then later, someone asked him about the publishing process. I think like how long it takes him from start to finish. And he came back to that. He's like, you know, the publishing is way down there. He's like, chaos, 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 book for the publishing. So, you know, it was good. A couple other quotes that I will share before I get into my review. He was talking about people, and I guess he is not much of a people person. He said multiple times throughout the evening that he's grumpy. He doesn't like small talk. He doesn't love always interacting with people. One time he was like, I don't even want to be here. No offense. So, you know, he's talking about, he's an introvert. The quote that I thought was so interesting and to me encapsulates his writing. He said, I don't like people, but I love humans. And then he went on to explain, and he was talking about just the way that he moves through life and observes people and how humanity is beautiful, but sometimes individual people may not always be. And I just thought that quote just encapsulated so much of life and the beauty in life and the way that he writes. Whenever I talk about Fredrik Backman and his books, I feel like I almost always use the words impeccable and beautiful, because the way that he writes, the way that he captures humanity is just so beautiful. I love words. Words just make me so happy. And when there's someone who can take, like, words are just these random things, random assortments of letters, and to see someone take these words and make something beautiful, like, it's so amazing to me. The other quote I wanted to share, the interviewer was asking him how he writes his characters, because so many of his characters seem on the surface to not be people that he could necessarily relate to, like women or teenagers or things like that. And his answer to that, he said, you know, when I'm writing my books, I like to operate under the assumption that women are people too. The whole room started clapping and applauding, but that really stuck with me for a few reasons. First of all, because so often in the writing world, a lot of male authors who do seem to approach writing as, what would a woman do in this situation? Or how do I make this woman believable? As opposed to assuming that she's a person too. How would a person react in this situation? And I feel like you can really tell in a lot of different types of books. And the way that Fredrik Backman sees women, like the interviewer was talking about how he has queer characters and teenagers and older people and women and men, like he just sees people as people. And it was just such a beautiful way of approaching life and his writing. The other thing that I really appreciated him sharing about was this book in particular. And I'm not going to do it justice. I'm not going to try to recreate everything that he said, but he was sharing that when he wrote this book, he was in a pretty difficult and dark place himself personally. And when he first wrote it, he said it was very depressing. And he gave it to his wife and his publisher or editor. And they both were like, this is not it. And he said, and he was even quoted in news articles, he said that he thought that this might be his last book. And so he was talking some about like that process and his process of writing this book and why this book was meaningful to him. And he was basically saying that in a lot of his books, he starts with the hope and then he weaves in the sad and tragic backstories. He said this book was all sad and tragic and depressing, and he had to go back in and find the hope. So he was talking about how he genuinely did not know if he could write another book. He said this might be it for him. It's too much. And then he was talking about how, continuing to write, continuing to find the story and to make it work. And he said, he doesn't know what the future holds. But then his book dedication: to anyone who is young and wants to create something, do it. And that just makes me so emotional, hearing him be real and honest and vulnerable about himself and his own process, and specifically how it ties into and relates to this book. It was just amazing. And there's his signature. The sad part, so many people came to this event, and so I went with my sister. We had to drive into the heart of this downtown area. Long story short, I parked in the wrong parking garage. We had to call the place. We were running late, so I had to call the place, say, hey, is it okay if I still park here? All these things. And we understood them to say, yes, it's okay, but don't stay too late. In essence, anyways, again, long story short. So we heard him speak. We got in line because I was gonna talk to him and get my book personalized. And we waited in line. How long were we in line? I think we waited in line 45 minutes, and we had barely moved at all. And we would have had to wait at least another hour and a half in order to meet him. And at that point, it was already getting pretty darn late. We weren't going to be getting home. We wouldn't have gotten home until 12 or 1 a.m. And we didn't know if I was going to get locked out of this parking garage. So we did exit the line early, which is so sad. But it was still an amazing evening. And I'm really, really glad that we got to go. Okay, moving on to the actual book review of My Friends by Fredrik Backman. First, for a synopsis. My Friends is a story about a group of teenagers, and specifically these 4 teenagers the summer that they were 14. It's also a story about a girl named Louisa. She is a teenager who grew up in the foster care system and in some pretty rough houses. So we have a dual timeline, Louisa in present day and this group of friends 25 years before. When the story opens, Louisa is at an art museum, and she has a postcard of a painting that is very meaningful to her. She's at this art museum to see the actual painting itself. Through a series of events, Louisa ends up running away from this art museum, and she runs into this man. They end up talking. Part of the beauty of Fredrik Backman's books is the way in which the story is told and the way that details and pieces of the story come out. So I have to be very careful what I say because I don't want to give away any pieces of the story. She ends up talking with this man. They end up parting ways. Things happen. And then Louisa meets a man named Ted. So the bulk of the book is about a train journey that Louisa and Ted take. Ted ends up being one of the 4 friends 25 years ago, as well as this other man that Louisa had met. Louisa and Ted set off on this train journey, and along the way, they end up talking, sharing pieces of their story, and Ted ends up sharing a lot of memories and stories from that summer when they were 14, 25 years ago. The stories that they share with each other are stories about grief, about hope, friendship, love, coming together to support those around you. Just beautiful, beautiful themes in this book. Okay, some of my thoughts on this book. I really enjoyed this book. It's not my favorite Backman, but it is up there. One minute I was tearing up, the next minute I'm actually crying, the next minute I'm laughing, and I almost never laugh in books. You will feel a lot of things in this book. There are so many great themes in this book. My personal favorite theme is just the theme of grief. Grief is such a complicated, all-encompassing, visceral human experience. And I just could not believe the times that Fredrik Backman, even in just a sentence or two, he would say something seemingly simple that just encapsulates grief and what it means to grieve and what it feels like and what this part of life is like. It can be hard to talk about and write about something that's so deeply personal. And he just did a phenomenal job in this book of having a real and raw and hopeful view of grief. I read this book pretty slowly. It came out in the beginning of May, and I was planning to start it in May, and then I didn't. And then I was like, well, I'll take it on vacation and I'll read it on vacation. And I did take it, but then, I'm riding on a train, there's a lot of noise and my kids are talking, and this is a book that I needed silence for so that I could feel all my feelings. So I paused that book, read some other stuff on vacation, and I waited until I came home. And then even still, I was reading it slowly because this was a book I just needed time to read it slowly and savor it, because he has so many one-liners, not in like a witty ways as well, but just the way that he can just write one sentence that's just, whoa, like I felt that. I loved the way that he wrote Ted. I really enjoyed his character. I really loved Yoar and his character. I loved Louisa for the most part. I loved her friend Fish that she talked about. I loved Christian. There are so many characters in this book. I really liked it. Absolutely a 5-star read for me. There are some trigger warnings in this book, so I do want to mention those. There are trigger warnings of domestic abuse, child abuse, grief, alcoholism, death, bullying, suicidal thoughts, and abandonment. For some spoilers, okay. This book is hard to talk about without giving spoilers because of the way that he writes it and kind of moving back and forward in the story and just not giving information until later. So it's hard to talk about in general. But now in this section, when indeed I can speak about spoilers because it's clearly labeled that this is spoilers, I find that I don't have a ton to say, because how do you parse out so many different pieces of a book like this? I will say I really loved Louisa and Fish and their friendship and the way, like, the things that they went through individually, and then the way that they came together, the way that they supported each other through unimaginable things. I'm so sad for Fish and for how her story ended up. I really would have loved to know her more. She seemed like a really good friend and a really neat person, and I really enjoyed her character. I really enjoyed their friendship, and I really liked those elements. I think my favorite character is probably Yoar. His story is quite heartbreaking, but the way that he saw his friends, like he knew his friends, he saw them, he believed in them, he loved them, he cared for them so strongly. Friendship like that is just such a gift. So I think he's my favorite character. So in conclusion, I loved this book. It had so many things that I love in a book. I love books about friendship. I love books about heavy emotional things that are well written. I love books that can make me laugh. I love books that can make me cry most of the time. This book, it was really good. I definitely would highly recommend it. Let me know in the comments if you've read this, what your thoughts were. Where would it rank for you as well if you've read other of his books? Where would it rank for you? I think this would be, I'm gonna put all the Beartown books together as one for me. So I think the Beartown series, and then probably My Friends, and then Britt Marie was here. I think are my top 3 right now. Anyways, until next time, happy reading.